Welcome to you if you have just joined us here on France 24. Now, coup leaders in Niger face a Sunday deadline to restore constitutional order or face military intervention. That deadline was made last Sunday by the West African regional bloc, ECOWAS. This Saturday, in one development, the Senate in Nigeria, neighbouring Niger, advised the nation's president, who is the current chair of ECOWAS, to further explore options other than the use of force to restore democracy in Niger, noting the existing cordial relationship between Nigerians and Nigerians. Now, with this deadline looming here in France, Niger's former colonial ruler, the foreign minister, Catherine Colonna, says it will back whatever course of action ECOWAS considers appropriate. Let's listen to what the French foreign minister had to say.
There's still time for the coup leaders to concede power and listen to the unanimous demands of the nations in the region, as well as the international community. If not, I think the threat of an intervention by these regional nations has to be taken extremely seriously. It's a credible threat, and there are already preparations being made, as well as declarations by these countries' governments.
Now, for more on this, I want to turn to Leonardo Alfonso Villalón, who is Professor of American Politics and coordinator of the Sahel Research Group at the University of Florida in the United States. Hello to you, Leonardo.
Thank you. My pleasure. Just a small correction. I'm a professor of African politics.
Okay. We're still, though, talking about this Sahel region and Niger, which you're a specialist in. First up, we have this deadline now looming for coup leaders in Niger. The ECOWAS bloc of West African nations is threatening military action from Sunday. Now, they want constitutional order resumed. That's the restoration of the president, Mohamed Bazoum, as president of the country. What kind of scenarios and consequences can we see in terms of that threat as this situation unfolds? We're in unprecedented territory here. We've got, as I said, the Senate in Nigeria saying that it wants tempers to cool a little about this.
Absolutely, yeah. So it is absolutely an unprecedented situation. I think many people were surprised to see the ECOWAS draw this red line in the sand about threatening military intervention. And as the deadline loomed, for tomorrow, we've been sort of seeing lots of discussions about whether, in fact, that will happen, who will participate, and speculation about what that might look like. The military chiefs of ECOWAS countries met over the last couple of days and apparently have developed a plan to do so. But exactly as of a few hours ago, it seems that the Nigerian Senate has refused to authorize the participation of Nigerian troops in an ECOWAS intervention. And so that clearly seems to throw this into question. And I think it's still an unfolding story. We'll see what happens.
Now, the overthrown President Mohamed Bazoum has written in the Washington Post that he is a hostage. What do you think was his aim in choosing a U.S. publication specifically to convey his message? Do you think that will have actually reached out to the people he's trying to talk to?
Yeah, I thought it was a very interesting development to have President Bazoum himself sign an editorial in the Washington Post, a major newspaper, obviously in the United States, describing himself as a hostage. Reading it, it looks pretty likely to me that he had some strong advice on how to word that editorial at the very least. But I think it's an intent to maintain pressure in the United States, or to try to rally the people in the United States who are most likely to maintain the pressure on the junta in Niger. The United States finds itself in a difficult position. On the one hand, wanting to insist on the principles of restoring democracy and denouncing coups, and on the other hand, risking losing a key ally in the region, and particularly seeing that key ally turn towards the Russians, presumably in the Wagner Group. And so this was clearly an effort to mobilize some forces in Washington. I would note, if I may, that specifically some senators, the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in the United States, Senator Menendez, has been very harsh on criticizing the coup in Chad next door and insisting that the U.S. take a strong line on it. And I think this was an appeal to people like him.
Looking at the longer-term consequences here of this crisis, what do you feel is the impact in terms of the long-term situation with the Islamist insurgency in the Sahel region?
Yeah, I think that's where there's obviously all sorts of stakes here. There's a stakes for the geopolitics of it. There's a stakes for the future of democracy in Niger itself. This was a coup that came out of nowhere, and that, in a sense, as opposed to previous coups that were attempts to fix an institutional blockage of democracy, this was not the case. But I think you're exactly right that the stakes for the future of the fight against the jihadi insurgencies in the region is perhaps the most serious of them. President Bazoum had taken, I think, the most productive line. It remained to be seen how successful it would be. But he had sort of tried to balance this question of maintaining military force and realizing that in the end, there's got to be some kind of a political discussion and some kind of a political solution to these insurgencies. And he'd taken a series of really interesting steps that involved not just military action, but negotiation, amnesty for former jihadis who renounced violence, and steps of that kind that I think were extremely promising. And this clearly seems to put an end to that. And I think that's a real tragedy.
Thank you so much for joining us here on France 24. Leonardo Alfonso Villalón, speaking to us from Florida University in the United States.